Trading. Welcome, Adrian.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Good. You're going to be talking about using artificial intelligence in systematic trading. Give us an overview, please.
Yeah, look, this is my favorite topic right now because it's such an accelerator for traders once you know how to use it properly. So there's some things you can do which just don't work and they're terrible, and there's some things you can do which absolutely magnify your efforts and accelerate your trading system development and implementation. So I'm going to go through both of those so you know what to avoid and what to do, and really speed up your trading journey to find strategies that work and implement them quickly.
Very good. If you can just put up the disclosures and disclaimers, please, Adrian. They are displayed on the screen right now for the audience. It's a live event. Adrian's talking to us from very, very early in the morning down in Australia, and we welcome any questions that you have. We'll do a Q&A towards the end, and you can access the handouts from the upper right if you hover over the materials icon, which has got a piece of paper with a paperclip icon on it. You should be able to click that and then click the PDF to download it. Use the question mark icon to its left to submit any questions, and we'll try and get to those throughout the session or at the end. Adrian, if you'd like to go to your opening slide, since we're recording today's session, you're going to automatically receive an email a couple of hours after we've wrapped up, and that will be available. The recording link will be available on the Interactive Brokers website. Over to you, Adrian.
Great, thanks so much. So again, my name's Adrian Reed, and this is AI in systematic trading. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is how to use artificial intelligence to build, test, and improve your trading strategies faster than ever. Okay, so just a bit about me. Since we're going to be talking, spending some time together, just a little bit of my background. I'm the founder of Enlightened Stock Trading. I've been trading systematically for over 20 years now. My trading is across Australia, US, Canada, Hong Kong, and crypto markets. I left a corporate job in 2012 to trade full time, and I've been doing that since then. And now my trading today is roughly 20 to 30 minutes a day or even less. It's fully automated. I don't spend any time watching the screen. And I'm going to show you some of the skills today of how to use AI to really accelerate your trading journey so you can get down this path as well. So here's the dirty little secret and the temptation in how you use AI in your trading. So let me ask you this. Have you ever typed something like this into ChatGPT? Give me an example of a profitable stock trading system for US stocks. And ChatGPT or any other large language model will very confidently give you some suggested rules. It'll say, okay, here's the US market, and if for your entry strategy, you want to focus on liquid stocks and price more than $5 per share, and the stock should be above its 50-day moving average and recent upward momentum, and it pulls back to the 20-day support, etc., etc., etc. And it gives you all of these rules, and you read them and you go, okay, this sounds plausible, right? It's got most of the components of a complete trading strategy. It's suggesting things that make sense. It sounds like what you've probably read before, and they're quite specific. You know, there's price levels, there's certain lengths of moving averages and certain RSI triggers in there. There's a risk management rules, there's a risk reward ratio. So you think, okay, cool. Obviously AI knows what it's doing, right? It's suggesting a complete system and it sounds great. But here's the question. Would you trade it with real money? So I asked ChatGPT this question. I got this answer. I took these rules and I coded them and I backtested them to see, okay, well, just how good is it at suggesting a system that actually works? And here's what happened. I backtested these rules straight out of the box from 1990, early 90s to today, and they lose money consistently. In fact, the rate of return was negative 6.2%, and the drawdown just kept increasing, and by the end of the backtest, it had lost 96% of the account. So how did we go from a very plausible sounding strategy that AI presented as a profitable trading strategy to losing basically all of our money? That's what we're going to get into in this session. Okay, so here's really the dirty little secret. AI-generated strategies are highly unlikely to be profitable because large language models have been trained on thousands of forum posts, blog articles, textbooks, Reddit, posts from X, social media, and most of that training data describes approaches that don't work. They haven't been tested, or if they were tested, they were tested badly and overfitted to historical data. And the trouble is, when AI is being trained, it can't distinguish between a good idea and a bad idea, or a good idea and a plausible sounding idea. All it can do, pardon me, all it can do is say, I found this information, and I also found it over here, and I also found it over here, so it must be right, and it pulls it into its data set. So in the training, it's basically pattern matching on text, not actual market data, not real performance, not back-tested results. And we have to remember this, that confidence in AI's language has absolutely no correlation with how good the trading idea is. So with all this conflicting information, I mean, look at this guy on the right here of this slide. He's read all of these books. He's got all his social media channels open. He's got magazine articles. He's got newspapers. If you had all of that information and you were trying to digest it all and find commonalities across it all, would that make you a profitable trader either? Probably not. And this is essentially what AI's training data is. It's just lots and lots of text that's been assembled, and it's found the same things that recur over and over again. And if one thing I've discovered in 20 plus years of trading, it's the things that everyone says work don't work because the edge is gone, or it never actually was there in the first place. So we need to do something different. So how do we escape from this? We escape by requiring testable, rules-based systems. And here's my philosophy. If you can't test it objectively, you can't know it works. AI ideas have to be expressed as a complete trading system objectively so that we can test it to see if they've got any value. We need to know every entry, exit, and position sizing rule precisely so that we can define it, so that we can code it, so that we can test it. So we take ideas from AI, we turn them into rules, we backtest them, and that can help us validate whether or not the idea is real or not. So the first step in this is getting a complete system idea. And a complete system is far more than just enter when the RSI crosses below 30 and exit when the price crosses above a moving average. We need a whole lot more than that. So we need a complete framework for a system first. And this is the first step towards getting usable ideas out of AI. We give it a complete framework and have it complete each section of the framework so that we get all the rules we need to completely backtest the system. So we've got universe and data, filters, entry, position management, exits, and portfolio and backtest settings. And you can see on the right-hand side, I'm not going to go through all of those, but there's far more than just the entry and the exit rule that we need to define in order to completely backtest a system. If we can define all of these components, then we can code the system, then we can backtest the system. But even if we do all of that, there's still a big problem. And the problem is garbage in, garbage out. You know, large language models present systems, may present systems that backtest profitably because they got a system from their raw training data that happened to backtest properly, but it was overfit. If a user, like if a writer of a blog or a website put up an article with a set of trading rules that was highly optimized, it was overfit to past data, so basically designed badly, it didn't include slippage and commissions, and it chose the very best parameter set from history, which is unlikely to perform well in the future, and it presented this article extremely well written, and AI picked it up and presented it to you as a profitable system because there was lots of evidence on that blog and it was written about in several other places. It may still give you a set of trading rules that appears to work. But if you start trading them in real life now, it's going to lose money because it was overfit to historical data. So we need more than just a backtest to validate a system that we get from AI. We need to check all of the parameters for robustness. We need to run an optimization and see how many of those parameter combinations are actually profitable. We need to check every rule for significance. We need to check the edge is actually stable over time, that it's not eroding recently. And We need to validate with in and out of sample data and probably on adjacent markets as well to make sure that the system is robust. Because we have to guard ourselves, protect ourselves from the risk that an idea that we get out of AI is picked up from an overfit data source that was designed badly. So we need this comprehensive process to take any idea out of one of the large language models before we implement it. And once we've got this process of backtesting and checking for the robustness and the significance of every rule, the stability of the edge, and validating on in and out of sample data, then we can start taking ideas from the AI models and running them through our process quickly and generating results to tell us whether or not they're usable. So here's the right mental model, the way to think about using AI in your trading. AI is your research assistant and a coding tool. You are the trader. AI is not the trader. AI doesn't know how to trade. You can tell it how to do certain steps, but out of the box, it doesn't know these things. So you've got to be the trader and you've got to be fully responsible for the process, and you use it as a tool to accelerate your process. We still need to have the process to correctly code, correctly backtest, and correctly assess whether or not a trading system is going to be profitable. We need to be responsible for that. We can't abdicate and outsource to AI, at least not yet. So AI can't replace your edge yet. What it does is compress the cycle time in evaluating and implementing edges or implementing systems. The system development process that I use now with AI is exactly the same as what I did when I was doing it manually. So you still need to know how to develop and backtest systems. You can just do it way faster now. So each cycle in an AI system development process is probably 10 times faster than it was before, because the AI can do the coding in a blink of an eye. It can implement I can run the backtest in the blink of an eye and then give you the results. But there's a trick to running the backtest, which I'll show you shortly. So what happens is a trader now, pardon me, who used to test one idea a week can now very easily test 20 ideas. Over a year, you're getting this massive compounding advantage because we're accelerating the process. But we need to first understand the principles and process to drive the models correctly. So here we've got the old way and the new way. I kind of like this diagram. One of the cool things about AI is you get to create amazing pictures that you could never draw yourself. But the more useful stuff is on the right-hand side of this slide. So what is AI actually good at that can help you with your trading? Well, the first thing is it's extremely good at coding trading systems once you teach it the right framework. If you just say, code me a trading system in PineScript with these rules, it'll probably give you something that works, or at least almost works. But if you tell it, whenever you code a system, I want it laid out like this. I want these sections included in the code. I want this allowance for slippage and commission. I want to execute my trades using this order type. I want to apply it to this market. And I want to make sure that I don't have future leaks. So check for that and so on and so on. You're giving it a framework to put the code into. Then it does it extremely well. So most of my AI coding now is just one shot because it knows how to do it, because I've given AI the skill to tell it exactly how to lay out the code and what to check for to make sure the code is correct. So just sitting in ChatGPT saying, code me a trading system helps, but it's not as powerful as it could be. We need the skill files, and using something like Claude Code or I forget OpenAI's equivalent, Codex or Codex, with the skill file to define how to code those trading systems. AI is also extremely good at backtesting trading systems once you've connected it to the right tools. Out of the box, in of itself, it can't backtest. But if you connect it to your backtesting engine with a command line interface, AI can send the code to your backtesting engine, run the backtest, and pull the results back. So I'm doing this with RealTest, and I'll show you that and talk more about it shortly. So it can't do it itself, but it's got to be connected to the right tool. So if you jump on ChatGPT and say, backtest this trading strategy, Who knows what it's going to do? It's probably going to try and download and install Python on your computer. It's going to get some Python backtesting engine that you have no idea whether it works or how it works or who developed it or whether it's got any faulty assumptions in there. There's too much risk with that. But if you connect it to the right backtesting engine and you teach it how to use it, then you've got a really good chance of success. The third thing AI is amazing at doing is brainstorming improvement ideas for your system. And I'm going to give you an example of that in this presentation. But you've got to give it clear context. Now, if you've kicked around with AI at all before, you would know that context is really important. So when you ask it a question, you've got to give it the context within which to answer the question. I've got a really great example of how to use market data for context, which I'll show you shortly. It's also great at analysis and filtering once you tell it how to analyze the data and how to filter the data. In my backtesting process, I have very clearly defined steps that it follows and evaluation criteria on each step that it will use to make the decision. Again, out of the box, it doesn't know this stuff, so it's going to guess, it's going to make assumptions about how to do it. But if you, as the trader, document exactly how you evaluate your system each step of the way, then AI can follow that much more quickly than you can. And so it will accelerate you while using your process. And that's the key. We need to use a good process that's predefined. We need to teach AI these things. One of the fantastic developments that comes with AI, or improvements that comes with AI system development, is the documentation and learning from past results. Every time we run a backtest with Claude or with Codex, you can tell it to capture the findings, to document as it goes, to record what it's going to do, what it did, the results, and the conclusion that it came up with. And this creates a documentation set that is so much richer than probably what most people do on their own. Whenever I tested a trading system in the past, I used to kind of record my process and record the assumptions I was making and the results I was getting. And at the end of testing a system, I'd have a couple of pages of notes. Now, going through this process with AI, I'm getting several dozen pages of notes for each system with all of the assumptions and codes and the things that work and didn't work and all of the data. It's a much richer data set. So then you can refer to that later. And if you develop a process that allows Claude to brainstorm by looking at all of your past documentation from all the systems you've developed before, it can start to learn from what you've done with it. It'll learn what's worked and what doesn't work. So now what's happening is if I'm developing a system for XYZ ticker, it's going to go and look at my entire research database that it's developed for me and say, okay, where have I used XYZ ticker? Where have I used a system like this? And it's going to pull all of the lessons. And then it's going to use those lessons to suggest rules, to suggest improvement opportunities, and so on. And it's going to start getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So I'm finding my strategy development is getting so much more powerful because the process is capturing more context, it's got more experience, and it's learning from the things that I did in the past. I'm no longer having to remember that when I traded on developed a system on XYZ ticker before, these filters worked really well. It's doing it automatically because it's learning from the past. But you've got to set up these things. You've got to have a process to tell the AI to test it in a certain way and then record the results in a certain place and then recall those later when you're testing other system ideas. It's also very good at following a consistent process. One of the things I've noticed about traders is that we get very curious. We start testing an idea and we say, oh, what about this? And what about this? And oh, what about this? And then another idea comes up. And so we're testing all of these ideas. We're doing lots of work madly on the keyboard, but we're not actually getting to completion. If you tell your AI model how to backtest a system, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, when you open that skill and say, okay, backtest the system for me, guess what? It's going to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. It's not going to get distracted with all the shiny objects and the things that can't pop into your mind along the way. So it gets through the entire process much more quickly. And it's also extremely good at brainstorming new ideas. Again, particularly once you start documenting your journey and learning from that information. So there's a bunch of things that it's really powerful for that save us a lot of time and energy. All of this compounds into a huge research advantage. So where you could previously test and code one idea a week, that maybe was 50 ideas a year. Maybe every week you had a chance of like 10% chance of putting one of those ideas into incubation, and maybe you got 5 or 10 ideas into incubation over the course of a year if you were testing regularly. Now with AI as a force multiplier, you get 20 ideas tested in a week easily. Put 3 of those into incubation, which ends up being more like 150 systems into incubation at the end of the year, which means you've got more choice. You can choose better performing, lower correlated systems to actually deploy into your portfolio because you're not starved for ideas. So this force multiplier is massive. Just to give you an example of how powerful this is, when I'm backtesting new system ideas now, I'm not doing it one at a time. I've often got 5 of them going at once because my AI model, so Claude Code, is going through my process simultaneously with multiple different systems. And it just pops up a message when it needs input or permission from me to keep going to the next step because it knows the process. It's got all of the skill files and the processes built in. It's got the connections to the software built in, so we can just run through the process. And I don't have to do that one at a time anymore. So before we go any further, I want to give you some don'ts. So here's the don't list for AI. Basically, don't ask it for the best trading system because it'll very confidently give you a set of rules that have absolute garbage results like we saw earlier. Don't trust its opinion on whether a system works. You need to test it for yourself. Don't skip the validation process because it sounds confident or the idea is really clear. Language, confidence of language has zero correlation with the profitable result that you want to get. So we need to validate everything. We also don't want to use the parameters that AI gives us blindly. If AI says use a 14-period RSI and treat 30 as the oversold level, the only reason it's doing that is because it's seen it in lots of different locations. It's not doing it because it actually works. It hasn't tested it. It's just seen that written in lots of its training data. It's the same reason AI uses M dashes all over the place, because in lots of books there were M dashes, and that's in the training data, and so AI replicates that. Thankfully, that you can get rid of that nowadays when you use AI for writing. Also, don't share any proprietary systems with free public AI tools. I only do this with tools where I've got an account that my data doesn't get used for training, because I don't want my trading systems out there for free for everyone. Also, don't ask it to backtest a trading idea unless you've set up the infrastructure, because you don't know how it's going to do it. You don't know what process it's going to use. You don't know what assumptions it's going to make. And absolutely don't let it trade for you. The idea of hooking up a large language model to a brokerage account or a crypto account is just terrifying, because large language models still hallucinate. They still do crazy things. Trading is something that needs to be 100% repeatable. That's a job for an automation, not for an AI. And they're two very different things. So don't hook up. I certainly wouldn't be hooking up an AI model to my brokerage account expecting profits. Not at this point in the game. I use the AI models as a tool to develop a system that works, which I then put into an automation. And I think that's a really critical distinction. Okay, so here's the setup that I'm using that I think you need. So obviously we want to get our trading ideas into interactive brokers executed cleanly. So how do we do that? Well, at the heart of a good trading idea is a backtested system, right? So I'm using Realtest for my backtesting. You could use Amy Broker. You could use a variety of other backtesting engines. Realtest is really working really well right now with Claude Code. You need data. I use Norgate data for my Australia, US, and Canadian data for stocks. And you want to interface your AI model with Realtest. So I'm using Claude Code. You can also do it with Codex. You can't do this with the general chatbot models. You need the coding version because it has to modify and create files in order to test ideas. And the important thing is Claude Code is actually not doing the backtesting on its own. It's doing the coding, and it's sending the code to Realtest to do the backtest. And it's sending the command to Realtest to optimize the system. And it's sending the command to Realtest to give it back the results. But in order to make that work, you need two things. You need skill files to define the process, and you need a documentation approach which you've trained Claude on so that it can produce the output that you want. So at the very least, you need a skill file that defines the syntax for the code. So how do you want it coded? And the best way to produce this is to do to write up a system code yourself, and then give it to Claude Code and say, this is a complete trading strategy, and ask it to develop a skill based on the layout and the syntax in that trading strategy. And then you can get all of the syntax rules from your backtesting engine. So Realtest comes with a Claude reference file that explains all of the syntax, so Claude knows what syntax to use. So how to write the rule for a moving average, how to write the rule for a how to code each indicator, RSIs and MACDs and all of that, and how to run a backtest and so on. Once you've got the syntax skill, you also need the backtesting process. So if you think about how you backtest a system, you want to document that process as well, so Claude Code knows what steps to run through. I don't have time in this presentation to run through my backtesting process. It's very extensive. It's got quite a few steps involved and intricate analysis for each step. But it's more than just code the system and press the backtest button, or code the system and press the optimization button. You've got to do in-sample data and separate it from out-of-sample data. You've got to make sure you've got all of the universe right, and the commissions and slippage assumptions and all of that. You've got to run an initial backtest, then you've got to run an optimization, then you've got to check for stability in the parameter space, and then you've got to do various other steps in that process. Then you have to also teach Claude how to do the analysis and make the decisions. So how do you look at a backtest result and decide whether or not it's good enough to trade, or whether or not it's good enough to send to the next step? You want to write that down and create it as a skill so Claude can reproduce your insights. So basically the goal is to get Claude Code to run the analysis the same way you do, draw the conclusions the same way you do, present the final results the same way you do, but faster. And then finally, you need a skill file to tell it how to document the results. So when I'm running a backtest with Claude, what's happening is it does the code, it sends it to Realtest, it runs the test, it brings the results back, and then it writes up the test results. So for every system, I've got a folder on my computer that has an idea file that has the original idea. It's got the baseline code file, which has the original code. Then it's got the optimized code file, which has all of the optimization parameters and my chosen values. And it's also got a testing journal that shows every change it made to the code and every test result and every conclusion that it drew and what it's going to do next. So by the time we get to the end of the process, we've got this really rich source of information in the testing journal that shows everything that we did. And then that documentation skill also, at the end of the whole process, it'll write up all of the learnings. Regardless of whether the system works or not, there's going to be learnings. You know, what filters worked on this market, what filters didn't work on this market, you know, what rules were fragile versus what rules were robust, what improved performance, what didn't, you know, what code worked and what didn't. You want to document all of these lessons so you can learn from them in future tests, or more precisely, so Claude Code can learn from them in future tests. And that documentation skill is going to result in the creation of this documentation. So at the end of the process, what Claude is doing for me is it's, again, creating this folder for each system idea, and that folder is populated with all the different versions of code, the original one, the in-sample optimized, the code with the brainstormed ideas, the code with the in-sample, out-of-sample comparison, and then the entire backtest code. And it's also populated with all the CSV files with the output of the backtest. So everything is there and we can go back and look at it. And if we want to brainstorm some new ideas, if we want to test another variation, all the data is there. So capturing all of that is really important. So it's not just a black box process. We want documentation and record keeping so that we can audit it and make sure it's doing the right things, and so that we can learn from it. And I think probably, and I've said this a couple of times now, but one of the most powerful aspects to all of this is the backtesting lessons and the and the trading journal. Capturing the lessons from every single backtest so you can reuse them and learn from them is one of the most powerful things you can do here. Even over the course of a couple of weeks, I noticed that the suggestions that it makes for system improvement ideas are getting better and better and more reliable because it's learned from so many tests that I've run. Another powerful thing that you can do with this is create an idea log. I always historically captured my trading system ideas just in Microsoft OneNote. I had a big OneNote that had lots of different idea pages on it. In fact, there were over 1,000 of them. What I've done now is I gave that entire idea log to Claude. I said, create an idea file for every single one of these. It went and created 1,068 different idea files in my working folder. And then now when I want to backtest a system idea, I just tell Claude, pick up the next idea, create the file, and run it through the process. And it will pick up the idea file, put it in its own folder, code that system idea, and then start running through my backtesting skills step by step, exactly as we've defined over here. So it's really accelerating this process dramatically. But notice this important point, implementation is not done by the AI, it's done by a separate automation program that does it analytically. It says, you know, what's the entry date, the entry price, the position size, which all comes out of the auto generation system here in Realtest. So this is the whole setup. Obviously, there's a lot of detail behind all of this, but I just want to make sure that you've got a roadmap so you know exactly where you need to go for this. Okay, so let's do an example. One of the first steps in the system development process is the ideal move that you see in the market and using that to create a hypothesis. So I came across this chart and I thought, okay, this is interesting here, right? Because there's some big sideways action, there's a big dump in the share price as a result of a panic. There's some volatility here, and then the volatility disappears and this beautiful smooth uptrend emerges in the market. I thought that looks interesting. So I gave Claude this chart, literally just the image of the chart. And I said, this chart shows the daily index roughly from this date to this date with the last bar. Look at the chart and describe the behavior you see. So it's looked at this image and it's described all of the different behavior that it can observe in the market, including what I just described to you of the sideways volatile, the big dump, and then the low volatile trend. So it can look at the image and describe what it sees. And this is exactly what you do when you open a chart and you look at the chart and you say, okay, what ideas does this give me for a new trading system? So this is the first step. Let it see the market. Share images of charts that you want to develop a strategy around and get it to describe them. Once it's described them, then you can get into the system development. So on the left-hand side is the prompt here I've used. And now I want to be clear, Claude already knows that I'm a systematic trader. Everything has to be 100% systematic. It's got to be testable. It's got to be coded the right way because I've created those skill files and that definition, those sort of behavioral requirements in there. So I can go in there and just tell it to create a trading system idea, that I want to create a trading system idea around these things. I don't have to tell it you are an expert systematic trader, blah, 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 like, you know, everyone says online, because I've already done it in the skill files. So here's what I said. I want to create a trading system that's objective and backtestable, that enters after a violent pullback is over and the market returns to low volatility rising conditions like we saw in mid-April to August 2025. It already described that information here. It's not mean reversion, it's a trend following strategy because that enters once the panic is over and a clearly strong low volatility uptrend is commenced. And I want to hold that position while the low volatility uptrend is in place. So I'm telling it what type of system to create. I'm not telling it the rules though. So I've asked it to give me 5 entry and exit rules that I can combine together into a complete system to backtest. And so Claude's then gone and given me, based on that prompt and based on the observation of the market, it's given me 5 complete system ideas. Notice I didn't ask it for the best system. I didn't ask it for a system. I asked it for a variety of systems to test because I'm going to test them anyway. I'm not going to trust the first one that comes out of the LLM to be profitable. So it's given me an ATR compression breakout system. I won't go through the rules, it'll take too long, but you can read that on the slide later. It's given me a Bollinger Band squeeze system with a trend filter. It's given me an ADX trend strength with a volatility normalization rule system. It's given me a linear regression slope-based system, and it's given me a Keltner channel-based system. So from one image and one prompt, we get 5 system ideas to test. Now they might be good or they may be garbage. We don't know yet. We have to test them. Okay. But what we're going to do is pick up one of those that we think feel is most compelling, and we're going to get Claude to code it. So here's what I've said. Using the real test coder skill, which is one of the skills I've got in my system, code system 1 into a complete real test file and ask me whatever additional questions you need to complete this system code. Now we're coming back here to a complete system, which we talked about earlier. We need to have a framework for a complete system. And I showed you that table earlier that had all the different components of a complete system. That's included in my coding skill for Claude. So Claude has a coding skill that references the correct syntax file from Realtest. It references the code layout that I like to use, and it references the complete system components list. So it includes everything it needs to include. So Claude's then come up and said, before I code this up, I need to clarify a few things. Which instruments are we going to trade on? How are we going to position size? What's the data source? What date range are we going to test it over? Do we need any additional exit rules, like, for example, a time stop or a trailing stop, because you didn't specify that in the prompt? And are there any re-entry conditions I need to be aware of? So it's asking me questions to round out its context so it can then completely code the file. So my response is, okay, instruments, yeah, let's trade this by ETFs, and I gave it a universe of ETFs to test it on. I told it how to position size, so equal position sizing. I've told it to use Norgate data. I've given it the date range. I've given it I've told it there's no additional exit rules, no time stop. I added a trailing stop, and I said there's no re-entry constraints. It should re-enter as soon as the conditions are met. And it's then given me the complete code set, the code file. This is now back testable. So I've run the back test, and the red is the index, that's the benchmark, and then the green is the trading system. Okay, it doesn't beat buy and hold. It's got lower drawdown. It's not exciting, but hey, Claude did it for me, and it took about 30 seconds. It took me far longer to describe this whole process than it took to actually do it in real life. So while it doesn't beat buy and hold, it's the first try, the first shot, if you like, of a system that was defined by AI. We obviously haven't optimized it. We haven't looked for different filters and improvement ideas. So there's a long way to go here, but it works. So why does this one work and the original one prompt where I asked it for the best for a profitable trading system idea doesn't work? This one is at least profitable because it's based on real market behavior and observations, because we started with that chart. We started with something real, and we used that as the context to develop the system rules. And I think this is quite important. You know, we need to give it the context within which to come up with the ideas, and that really improves the result. So now what I said is I want to adjust the code to run an optimization, but I don't want to use all of my data. I just want to use an in-sample period, create a new code file, label it as in-sample, and then produce that code for me. So it's produced that code for me. And then I could either pick that up and run my normal optimization process, or I could just tell Claude to do it after developing the optimization skill. I happen to have the optimization skills, so I got it to run the optimization. I went through the entire process step by step. So it did the optimization, it tested all of this, the rules for significance to make sure that they were all pulling their weight and making a difference. Is this making sense? I tested the parameter values that we'd optimized for robustness. I varied them all a little bit, plus or minus, to make sure that I wasn't just using an overfit parameter value, and the surrounding parameter values were all solid and robust. Here's the in-sample result. Quite profitable, matches, more or less matches buy and hold return with much lower drawdown. But I want to improve it even further. and I want to give it context within which to improve it. So in real test, I've run the backtest manually, and I've found the worst trades. And I've taken a screenshot image of the 5 worst trades. And I've fed them into Claude and said, these are the 5 worst trades the system generated. Use this to come up with 5 hypotheses to test to improve the system by filtering out bad trades like these. So this is the context it needs to have the improvement ideas. You're not just asking it for improvement ideas, you're asking it for specific ideas to eliminate or remove trades like this from the system. So it analyzes each of the trades, and then it comes up with 5 hypotheses, exactly as requested. Add a broad market trend filter, require the trend moving average to be rising, require a deeper volatility compression, require minimum recovery from the panic low, require a sustained volatility compression over several bars. And then it's elaborated on what those rules might be and created the code. So each of these is a single line of code that you can add to the strategy. I don't know about you though, but I'm a bit lazy. I don't want to add this manually. So now what I've done is I said, all right, code this into a real test switch code to allow me to test each of these rules separately in a single optimization. So what this code does is it has each of those 5 rules that Claude came up with, and it combines them together into this switch function. And I can run an optimization that steps from rule 1 to rule 2 to rule 3 to rule 4 to rule 5 and compares it to the baseline. So the first one here is the baseline, so no additional filter, and then it steps through each of those other filters. So now with this, what you can do is you can press optimize in real test, and it'll run baseline, and then baseline plus rule 1, baseline plus rule 2, baseline plus rule 3, and so on, and it'll give you all the results in one table. And it looks like this. Well, this is actually pivoted around, but these are the results. So we can see with the baseline over here, and then each of the additional rules. No, sorry, this is the first improvement idea. And so we've got the rate of return, the max drawdown, the MAR, percent wins, percent losers, etc. And we can see that one of these ideas actually had quite a bit of potential. It improved the returns, it reduced drawdown, it improved the MAR ratio. So I'm going to pick this idea up and continue to carry it forward. So now we've got an optimized system with an improvement idea added. That was all testing done in sample. Then I've run the test out of sample. Now out of sample, it doesn't outperform the index, but it is still profitable. And this system is not necessarily designed to outperform the index. It's designed to extract a certain edge from the market. And if the conditions for that edge don't exist, it's not going to trade very often. And you can see in here, there's a lot of flat spots because the condition for that edge didn't appear much in the out of sample data. So we actually need to compare the stats in sample and out of sample, right? So we've got the in sample performance, the out of sample performance, and we can compare rate of return, somewhat similar, drawdown, okay, it degrades a little bit, but it's still somewhat similar. The expectancy is a little lower out of sample. Average win rate is about the same. Average loss is about the same, and so on. So you can then make the decision about whether or not this is good enough to incubate. Now, this is just an example throwaway system. This is clearly not good enough to trade, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it, but it demonstrates the process. So summary of what we've done. We started with a market observation, which was a pattern on the chart. We used AI to analyze that market and generate 5 testable hypotheses. We used AI to write the code. We analyzed the losing trades to generate improvement hypotheses. We tested those improvement hypotheses systematically, validated the results of the final system in sample or out of sample. And the total time with AI assistants to do this was a couple of minutes, not days. Okay, there was some processing time to run the backtest on top of that, but the AI piece was pretty quick. We had a sound process, AI made it fast, and that combination is what gives us the edge. So here's 6 principles to keep your AI trading productive and safe. Always test before trusting, no exceptions. Doesn't matter how confident it sounds or how plausible the idea sounds, you must test it with a rigorous process. Make sure you express every idea as a complete objective rule set before testing it. Separate in-sample and out-of-sample data and force the AI to only test on in-sample first. validate, optimize the system, fine tune it, and then validate it on out of sample data and related markets to make sure that you didn't overfit. Make sure you stay the trader. AI is your assistant, not the other way around. You have to tell it how to do the things. 5 is just for your long-term viability. I would say don't share your proprietary rules with free AI tools. You want to use paid subscriptions and turn on privacy, whatever model you're using, turn it on so that it doesn't use your conversations in its training data. And then remember that AI gives you speed and your process gives you the edge. So here's what I want you to do next. Identify a market behavior you want to capture and describe it in plain English and provide some examples, charts ideally. Use AI to generate 3 to 5 testable rule sets based on that description. Then use AI to code one of those rule sets. Backtest it on in-sample data like we've described. And if the in-sample results are promising, optimize it, fine-tune it, and validate it. What I want you to do is just start this AI process. You can build the skill files up as you go. When it asks you how to do things or when you have to describe stuff, you can tell Claude to build a skill file around that so that it can do it in a repeatable way in the future. And what I'm going to do is give you some of the prompts that I use to create this presentation and this file after. So if you register here, I'm going to put that prompt library together so that you know what I've done to produce this system so that you can produce something similar for yourself. All you need to do is scan the QR code or go to bit.ly/ESTIB and opt in there, and you'll get not only the prompt toolkit for systematic traders, but also all of these additional resources as well. 2 ebooks, a number of cheat sheets to improve your trading, 3 trading courses so that you can get on the right systematic trading path, a quiz to identify some of your gaps, and a complete mean reversion trading system that you can pick up and test and use as an example. So that's everything I have for you. Hopefully this has opened your eyes to what's now possible with AI. Scan the code, get these resources, including the AI prompts we used for this presentation. And I'd love to take any questions if there are any.
Lovely. Just brilliant. Love it. Thank you very much. You get lots of thumbs up there from the audience. Lots of questions. Please do put them into the chat panel. We'll see how many we can get through in the next few minutes. How do we know if proprietary rules are not being used by AI provider like Anthropic in your case?
Yeah, good question. So typically, when you open up any LLM, it's going to use your data for training. It's going to use your chats for training. There's for each of the models, it's in a different place. But if you go to the settings, once you've got a paid account, you can usually go and you'll find a little toggle to turn that off, to tell it not to use your data and chats for training its models. So just make sure you go do that. You can probably just Google how to do it for whichever model you're using. It's usually not that hard to find, but you definitely want to find that option and toggle it off. If you're using a free version, you probably won't have that chance. It will use your data for training.
Abdul Wahab says, I developed a trading strategy with Pine scripts using Claude. Claude connected to TradingView. He back tested and is ready to trade on a real account. I connected my interactive account with TradingView. How can I use the strategy to trade on my live interactive account? Can I use with AI or plug in directly to interactive?
Yeah, look, this is where I think the distinction between AI and automation is really important. If you have a trading system that is completely objective, then you don't need Claude to trade that for you because it's programmatic. You know, there's already plugins between TradingView and interactive brokers to make that work. Now, I don't use TradingView, so I can't tell you exactly what they are. But what you need is the automation to link those two together. You don't need Claude in the mix. Claude is just for the development of the systems and the testing and the coding for you. But once the system is coded, to implement code day to day, you just need like a Python program that will run the code, generate the signals, place the trades with IB. You don't need Claude in the mix for that.
From Kevin, is this software able to be uploaded to MetaTrader and created as an optimization tool?
Look, so I I use RealTest as my coding engine, which and backtesting engine, which is kind of similar to MetaTrader. I would argue that RealTest is like 1,000,000 times better, but anyway, if you use MetaTrader for your backtesting and for your signal generation, then what you need to do is figure out if there's a command line interface for MetaTrader that Claude can interact with. If there is, then you can do the same process that I just demonstrated. You can give Claude a skill file that tells it how to code for MetaTrader, and give it a skill file tell it how to backtest, what steps you want to go through, and then have it interact with MetaTrader and drive that. Now, again, I'm not a MetaTrader user, so I don't know if there's a command line interface. I suspect there probably is. But if there's not, then you need to do it offline. So you give Claude the skill file for the code for how to develop the system and code the system. And then you pick up the code out of Claude and you put it into MetaTrader and you run the test. And then you get Claude to code the optimization version of the system. And then you put it into MetaTrader and you run your optimization. So if there's no command line interface, you'll just have to manually bridge that gap yourself. With RealTest, the cool thing is Claude can just talk directly to RealTest and make all of that happen.
Here's a good one for you, Adrian. Dan asks, why is it that when I ask Claude or Gemini the same question about using a technical indicator such as I think he means the RSI, I get two completely opposite answers?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, this is like if you ask two traders, how do I use RSI? You might not get the same answers as well. You might get some things that sort of sound and feel a bit the same, or you might get completely different results. They've got different training data. They've got different model weights. The chat interfaces work differently. They interpret prompts differently. It's like talking to someone in French versus English, and let me say a different example. It's like talking to someone who is a native Russian speaker but speaks English and a native French speaker but speaks English. You ask them the same question, they're probably going to interpret it slightly differently and give you a different answer, even if they kind of, have similar backgrounds. I just don't think that AI is a source of truth. It's a source of information. And I think that distinction is really important. And you ask two different people the same question, you get two different sets of information. There may or may not be overlap. You ask two different AIs, same thing. It's an information source. It's not a source of truth. So if we start treating it as such, then we can use it as ideas for our trading. And you can take the idea from the first model and the idea from the second model, and you can backtest them yourself like we talked about today. That's really powerful. But I would never, ever take any of those ideas and use them blindly. So hopefully that helps.
Gordon asks, he's not clear what in sample and out of sample means in this context. Just a little bit more.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good question. So when you're trading systematically, you code up your trading rules and you're going to test them on your historical market data. What we want to do when we're designing our system is test them on a portion of our data, because if we're going to test our rules and then optimize them and then add some filters and try and improve them and make the system performance better and better, we need some other data to validate the system on. So we're doing the testing, the optimization over here on the in sample, and then we save the out of sample data to validate our final system on. So we do all the testing, finalize the system, and then we test it over here on the unseen data, the out of sample data, and validate that it still works. Because the step here, optimization and fine tuning and filtering, can lead to overfitting. Overfitting your system to past data, overfitting your system to particular instruments. And you need some unseen data to validate that you didn't overfit and you actually created a system that really works. So we use some of the data from your target universe for out of sample, and then we use some other markets, some adjacent markets for out of sample as well. For example, if I'm testing on Australian stocks, I might test from the year 2000 to 2020 as in sample, do all my optimization there, and then test 2020 to today as out of sample. But then I also take the system and apply it to US stocks and Canadian stocks to see if it holds up and still works in those other markets. That gives me the confidence that I didn't overfit to the in-sample data.
What kind of what kind of code does Claude generate in your case? Is it Python?
Okay, good question. So this is where the code skill file is important. So I use RealTest as my backtesting engine. That's off-the-shelf software. So it produces code for RealTest, which is specific to RealTest's scripting language. If I was using Amy Broker, I would have had a skill file that tells it to use Amy Broker code. If I'm using a Python backtesting engine, it would produce Python. So it's not producing code that can run on its own. It's producing code for the backtesting engine that I've specified. So, you know, whatever you're using, if you're using TradingView to do your backtesting, then it would be PineScript. If you're using RealTest, it'd be a RealTest scripting language, or Amy Broker formula language. You're specifying, and it knows enough to be able to code reasonably well in most of those languages because a lot of the documentation is online. But it's important to have a skill file that references a syntax file that tells it exactly how to do things, and that will usually come from the backtesting software provider. As I say, when you install RealTest, it comes with a skill file for large language models that gives all of the syntax requirements for a RealTest script, so it can do it right first go.
Any particular model within Claude? Opus, Sonnet, or Haiku?
Look, it doesn't. I wouldn't use Haiku. I think it's probably not so great for this. I generally use Sonnet because if I use Opus, I run out of credits too quickly. Sonnet's more than good enough to do the coding of this sort of thing. If you're doing some really deep brainstorming and analysis, Opus is probably better. But generally, I would say Sonnet is more than capable, and you get a lot more mileage for your credits, if that makes sense. I did it with Opus the first few times, and I'm on a max plan, and I was still just running out of credits before I got through a single test. But with Sonnet, I can run 5 simultaneously and get through the whole process and still have plenty of credits left at the end of the day.
Does RealTest have an interface to connect to interactive brokers, or how does the RealTest engine connect to Ibkr's API? Direct interface or custom code?
Yeah, good question. So RealTest out of the box comes with a program called AutoClerk, which is like IB's basket trader, but kind of on steroids. It can go and see your IB account balance, all of your open positions through the API, pull those back, reconcile with the positions you should have open according to the system, generate the signals, and place the trades. So it does do that out of the box. It's not fully automated out of the box, but it is pretty easy to automate with some batch files, and there's instructions on how to do that in the RealTest documentation. I just want to be clear, RealTest is primarily an end-of-day backtester. They've just released intraday data, intraday functionality. I'm an end-of-day trader. I use daily bars, so it's pretty easy to automate. You just need to use the IB API and place your orders once a day.
Does Enlightened Stock Trading offer a training course that would help me to get up to speed with the process you outlined in this presentation?
Oh, absolutely, of course, yeah. So the Trader Success System covers all of that. I won't talk about that in detail now. I don't think that's appropriate. But if you opt in here on the QR code or that link, you'll get some information, and we can talk about how I can help you. I've got a process that gets you through the entire learning journey of systematic trading very, very quickly.
And I think the last question that I can handle today, have you had any luck coding any intraday strategies?
Yeah, look, as I say, I trade on daily bars primarily, but I have developed plenty of intraday strategies that use daily bars. So for example, a mean reversion system that enters on a limit order and exits market on close, or an intraday stop system that enters on a breakout and exits at the close, or on a profit target. Yes, so I've done that quite a few times, and I've got several of those in production. But I don't use intraday data. I'm using daily data, mainly because I don't want to watch the market at the 5-minute time frame. It's not a lifestyle that I'm interested in. And I do believe that even if you're automated, you still need to be attentive. And if you've got an automation that's running on 5-minute bars or 1-minute bars, you need to be at the computer all day to make sure that if things go wrong, you can correct it. And so I much rather have a relaxed lifestyle. So I trade on daily bars. So I only have to look at the market once a day when new orders are placed.
I think there was another question on that front about. I think the question was the gist of the question rather was,
Yeah.
have you had any success using AI to build strategies that you used in real life?
Oh yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah. So because I'm following literally the same process that I do manually, just faster. So my incubation, my pool of systems in incubation has grown massively. I've got a couple of systems that I'm trading live, and yeah, this AI process is the same as what I would do naturally, and it's quicker, and so it's really accelerating my growth of my system portfolio.
Yeah, I know, Adrian. This is my final observation here. I know that you are very system-based and level-headed about your approach to the market. You could literally turn the screens off. Markets are really looking extended, or maybe it's the beginning of a bull market. What are your thoughts? Are there any red lights flashing, or are you maybe to you that means that some of the like the long only strategies are just running out of steam? Any broader thoughts?
Look, I do try really hard not to have those sorts of thoughts and just follow the systems. But let me tell you what I do with those observations. Because of course I look at the markets and go, whoa, you know, the moves of the last month or so have been kind of crazy in certain areas of the markets. And that immediately creates an emotional response, which then immediately makes me think what's going to happen next. This is all the emotional me, not the trader me. Okay. So what I do when I have an observation like that, I say, all right, what could happen next in the market? All right, and here's what could happen next. The trend could continue. There could be a shock against the trend before it continues, or the trend could reverse. That's what could happen next, essentially, right? And then I think, all right, in my portfolio of strategies, is there something that will profit if the trend continues? Yes or no? If yes, happy days. If no, okay, I've got some work to do to develop that strategy. Is there something in my portfolio that would profit if there's a shock against the trend before it continues? If yes, happy days. If no, I've got some work to do. And is there something in my portfolio that will profit if the trend reverses? Yes or no? Same thing. So I try not to predict or anticipate. I just follow the rules. But what I do is I use those emotional reactions as triggers to look at my portfolio and say, all right, if that happened, would I be okay? And that's really the best way to use your emotions in trading. It's to direct them towards research to deal with gaps and insufficiencies in the portfolio. If you start doing that very quickly, the stress comes out of trading because you address all of the things that are concerning you systematically and you put those systems in place. Then it doesn't matter if the market reverses. I don't care. It doesn't matter if the market continues. I don't care. So like something will be profiting in my portfolio somewhere. That's the way I think about this stuff.
Very good. Adrian Reed, thank you very much indeed for joining me today.
Absolute pleasure. I hope everyone got something out of it. Again, scan the code and watch the replay. Come back to me with any questions. Super pleased to help.
All right, and Adrian, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to send you a spreadsheet of the questions in the next 24 hours, so you can run them through your AI lab, condense them into a single sentence, and figure an answer.
Absolutely. And so look, if there's some good questions in there that I haven't answered, what I'll do is I'll put together some answers, and for anyone who opts in here, I'll do my best to give you those answers as well, so that you've got all the information that you need.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adrian. And lots of thumbs up coming across the screen from the audience. I'd like to thank them as well for their patience today and for some brilliant questions. Thanks, everybody. Right. And bye for now.
Bye for now. Thank you.